This is the Real Footy Podcast. Coming up, the Blues find themselves in more bother after losing to North Melbourne. We ask what it means for the future of coach Michael Voss and changes at Princes Park. Tagging tactics are under the spotlight. The Bulldogs welcome back Jamarra Ugle-Hagan, and a key son shuns offers to return home to Melbourne so he can stay on the Gold Coast. All of that and more right after this.
Kicks inside 50 for the Giants. Riccardi caught at the back. Falls down to Toby. Bursts away. Tumbles a kick goalward. Bouncing. It's there.
Josh Dacos. Still to Hill. At the back. Elliott. Nick Dacos. Wait for the cheer. Wait for it. They know. The Magpie fans know what that means. And they know who kicked it, and so does Nick. Tough afternoon. Michael Voss reading the riot act to his Blues. They trail by 46 points.
Now, good lip read too. Do your role.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson, and joining me today are Jake, Niall and Caroline Wilson. Welcome to you both.
Good morning, everyone. And interesting round, Caro and Glees.
Fascinating round. Only one really good game. A couple of... Well, no, that's not true.
Expansion Cup.
Yeah, the Expansion Cup was a great game, and actually Brisbane's performance against Geelong captivated me. Well done on breaking the Matt Rowell story, Michael.
Thank you. It's always...
You told everyone that he was staying. At the start of the year, there was a lot of talk he might end up at Geelong, but...
Geelong, particularly because he was known to have met with some clubs last year that he met with, but he met with several of them, and he met with Luke Beveridge and he met with Craig McRae and Chris Scott, but they weren't the only clubs. Essendon and St Kilda were also very interested. But it was really down to, if he was to go, it would have been basically, I think, Collingwood or the Bulldogs were the two that he was very impressed with. Luke Beveridge, but he wanted to stay, so it's a good sign for the Suns.
No, not very good signs for Carlton. You led your 4 points column on the Blues this week. You've all but predicted that Michael Voss will not be there.
I would be surprised
at the start of next year. But you've also been quite definitive that Carlton will not do the old Carlton and sack him mid-season. Why are you so convinced of that?
People I've spoken to there, I don't think that there's any. I don't think they think there's any benefit in making those sorts of changes right now. Now, they're not saying that that's going to happen either. They're not saying that Voss is gone or anything like that. Those decisions haven't been made. But I just don't see that sort of change happening in the immediate sense.
What's your view, Jake?
I don't see this. I don't think from conversations I had over the journey, I haven't spoken to a senior person yesterday. I was off, but I'd be surprised if it was done before the end of the year. I'd be very surprised. But the only thing I'd say is you do have to position for assistant coaches sometimes. And I think changes will be made in the assistant coaching ranks and possibly elsewhere in the footy department. Voss, I think, is a genuinely open question because there's a good case for, there's a case against. There's also the question comes into it, which it has at Carlton in the past, of who's available. And who's available? The only thing I'd say with Graham Wright is not necessarily the person that will just say, oh, here's John Longmire, let's hire John Longmire. If you look at what happened at Collingwood when he had that decision after Nathan Buckley, that was done mid-season. That was a much worse position that Collingwood was in relative to their talent than Carlton. And he'd been there much, much longer. He was in his 10th year.
And he was out of contract.
So Voss has a contract, and I think there's going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
One more year after this?
Yes. So there's going to be an interesting discussion of, can Carlton culturally do this after all the carnage they've had with paying out coaches? Is that going to compromise, or are they going to make a decision saying, if we don't think he's the right person, we have to do it? So it's a really intriguing call to me. I'm not going to call it right now which way it'll go, except that it will happen at the end of that decision will be made officially, at least at the end of the season.
Some of those things can also, and I'm not saying that what the payout would be, but a lot of the newer contracts are capping payments for coaches. So
I don't think Michael
months.
Voss's is.
Yeah.
I reckon he'll get the year. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I think the wealthier clubs are very happy to give them the time. And Carlton is still a wealthy club.
Well, he got that contract after the preliminary final appearance, did he not? I think he did.
Yeah.
He got that extension. So
I
it's
don't
more
think there
likely
was a
to be
caveat on it at all.
So I think really there's a few options here for the Blues and for Rob Priestley and the board and Graham Wright. If Brian Cook was still there, what do you think, Caro? I think he would be more obligated to stick with Michael Voss.
Yeah, no. Well, no, I don't. I don't think
so?
that. I don't think that. I mean, Brian Cook does have a history of sticking with coaches, but he sticks with the ones who he thinks are capable of getting somewhere. I think probably my personal view is Graham Wright, whatever he's going to do, he's already made up his mind to the 90%. And I don't think it looks great for Michael Voss. But I think that that is just one of a raft of changes. And again, I'm not getting any information here, but the footy department is clearly not working cohesively.
Well, I think what we will see is that the handover from Brian Cook to Graham Wright was supposed to be October. I think it'll be a bit more advanced than that, to allow changes that will be made to be made. Now, that's not to suggest that Brian Cook's an impediment to that, but it is probably the moment of saying, okay, we're ready to make these various changes, and there will be change. I mean, there just will be. Now, who that is, and who that's limited to. Look, Graham Wright's spent basically the year as the de facto conducting virtually a review of the footy department.
Yep.
Because he's come
Outside
in and he's been learning but he's been learning the CEO stuff, but he's also been very heavily focused on footy. He's been basically, looking at that and looking at how they structure that and who are the right people. There will be changes within that. But contracts will come into it. Which coaches, which assistant coaches, which list managers, recruiters are contracted, and so they'll look at those. But there will be change within that, and that'll happen before the end of the season.
Yeah, the other thing here is we're focusing on Voss, but there will be big calls made on players.
Yeah,
and I think that actually might be the more intriguing outcome here, because they could do, who knows what they could do. I think it's a very simple equation. You say, well, they'll change the coach and they'll change some assistant coaches. Well, that's pretty straightforward. But gee, it'd be a hell of a call to say, okay, we're going to trade I'm saying this for argument's sake, we're going to trade
Harry Mackay,
or we're going to trade Sam Walsh,
who would have had a lot more draft value last year when Melbourne were keen to get him, weren't they?
I think he'd still have
trade
value.
Well, they weren't keen to trade him for Petrarca. That came up and that came as a discussion point. I don't think they wanted to trade Petrarca for they didn't, did they?
No.
I reckon they could have got that deal done with Carlton.
But at some point they're going to have to bite the bullet on one of the
big 5 or 6. Well, they're going to lose to Conning. I think that likely, not more likely than not, they'll lose to Conning. Not a certainty, but the way it's going.
But there are some other elements at play in the performance. You've got Mackay's been in and out of the team with injuries and other issues that have kept him out. Curnow had 3 surgeries different over the off season, staggered throughout the off season. So he only just got to the line to play early in the season. So he's not been fully fit either all year. And they're their two sort of strengths, as those two guys up forward. But the game itself needs to be addressed. Some of these decisions, as you say, Tom DeConing, will be taken. They won't be there. Carlton's decisions, they'll be the players' decisions. The problem they have in seeking to rebuild right now is that this is a terrible draft, and in one sense, that's a good thing that they traded Jagger Smith last year. They traded this year's first round pick to get Smith, so they've already got this hopefully elite talent that
first round pick's still a first round pick.
Yeah, but there's a lot of other players that'll push those picks around. Now they'll get a first round pick if DeConing leaves, and so they'll have something there. Now you can either use that or trade it, either to clubs for more picks for points, or you can trade it for another player. They're an attractive club still to go to, notwithstanding some of the stuff that's been going on. They are still a destination club for players.
Well, extraordinarily, and they've had, their off-field year has been dreadful as well. They've had, it's been touched with scandal, several times. They've still managed to get over 100,000 members. A team that doesn't have 100,000 members, and we just should mention, is North Melbourne. That was a 90-plus point turnaround from the Good Friday debacle, Jake. And unfortunately, North didn't quite really put them away as it looked like they were going to at three-quarter time. But we should acknowledge that they have had a great 6 weeks, North Melbourne, since that draw with Brisbane.
Yeah, and not only that, but it is interesting for the criticism of the Perth deal, and I don't like the selling of the game to Fremantle as a concept. I don't like home teams essentially getting an extra game through a financial arrangement at their home ground with travel. But the word out of North strongly is that this has been a bonding exercise and that the players have gotten closer together and that this is actually they're benefiting from that time away.
It's ticked so many boxes. $2.5 million.
Yep.
The AFL have been able to appease the two WA clubs by giving them an extra home game. North aren't going to do much anyway this year. Yes, if Fremantle just get in and say the Bulldogs or Gold Coast just miss the 8, it'll be a
controversy.
I suppose so, but they've got so many disadvantages, the West Australian clubs. I just think of all the compromises footy makes, this is a pretty good one.
If you're going to do it, if you're going to let a team they end up with 13 games in their state, 9 out of their state, the WA teams are the ones.
Yeah, and they don't have gather round. I mean, they don't have opening round.
But more specifically to the footy, they've been playing a lot. The way they've been playing has been really impressive, and I'll be critical of the recruiting of Daniel and Parker and Darling. Thinking, where does it get
Parker's
them?
Been good.
Yeah.
He's been an on-field leader.
I like Parker.
I don't like. I'm not sure where the Daniel and Darling recruitments take you. Parker I can see because you can see he's a warrior.
There were moments, when it got a bit iffy, in the game on the weekend when I thought he really stood up and showed a lot of on-field leadership.
McKercher's, he's a talent, isn't he?
He's a talent, and he would be high on the Tasmania target list. So,
and George Wardle, who was sat down for the last quarter, given his injury history,
and Clarko dropped a couple of players.
Yeah,
Griffin Logue included, to try and get a better defensive response, and it seems to have worked.
And
it's because they held Carlton.
Toby Pink, you wouldn't have expected that.
All the Toby Pink sort of a new cult figure.
Yeah,
and he kept Charlie Curnow goalless, and he's held Tom Lynch, he's held Logan Morris to nothing.
They're heading towards in a couple of weeks their big 100th anniversary game against the Bulldogs. You wouldn't expect them to win, but they're going in with a lot more momentum than they were a month ago, Jake.
Exactly, but this is sort of what I hoped they'd be.
They should have been.
They should be. Look at the players they've got. They've
completely.
got a lot. I mean, there's another way of looking at this. We're looking at this as like Carlton have completely underachieved in this game. But then you start to look at the actual midfield players. Does Carlton have anyone like Luke Davies-Uniacke who can explode away from a stoppage?
No.
Do they? No, they don't. Do they have someone like, you start to go through the North.
Harry Sheasel's
a ball magnet. Some of the talent that North have got is better than some of the Carlton talent. It's just not as mature.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's going to be lost in all this.
Well, Harry Sheasel moved forward too. He's moved all around, and it's the early criticisms.
And he's very bankable. He's a treasury bond, isn't he, as a player?
Yeah. So Carlton, I mean, the point of this game, because you can still look at Carlton and say, they're sitting 10th. Why are we talking so dramatically about them? Well, they're 2 games outside the 8. They've lost to the side that's finished bottom 2 for the last 5 years. It's difficult to see from this point here how Carlton recovers.
Just say one thing too. Sam Walsh might be their most important player when you look at what they don't have and what they do have.
Well, right now it seems like Jagger Smith's the most important player, and he's yet to play a game.
Oh, poor Jagger Smith. I'm feeling sorry for him. I mean, when Carlton people say, but we haven't had Jagger Smith, come on, guys. I mean, Richmond have got some really good early draft picks. They don't make that much difference when it's all said and done. Now, you also wrote about the Windhager tagging job on Nick Dacos.
Yeah.
He's ended up getting, I think, a $1,500 fine.
for the. I think that
Not
was for the sort
knee.
of a slap or an open. Yeah. Very grainy footage. He was, for the knee. Look, it was just more about the fact that Ross. Well, what I wrote, but there can be a bit of the rest of the comp sort of goes, so Dacos gets tagged, suddenly it's a big issue when other players do get tagged. That's absolutely true. But the fact of it is that
and the coach
he's one
called
of the
for it
best
2
players.
years ago, didn't he?
Yeah. But he's one of the it's because they're box office, so you see it, you watch it. He's one of the better players, so you're seeing it.
So did he overstep the mark, Ugle-Hagan?
Ugle-Hagan. Oh, I think some of those were old school sort of niggling, Stephen Baker-ish tactics.
Yeah, and did the umpires do enough then, Jake?
Well,
you can't see everything.
You can't see everything. It's just sort of with 4 umpires, maybe you need to assign the tagger umpire. I don't know. The behind the goal footage showed there was some stuff that would be a free kick, but it was funny to hear Ross Lyon suggested he got 2. That maybe I think Ross was
I did feel that the early free kicks were something of a reaction to the King's birthday, where in the first quarter of King's birthday, the whole crowd was onto the fact that there was this tight tag going on, and there's a lot of grabbing and holding, and it was unpenalised. Now, I think that I got the sense that they've looked at that as well and thought, oh, we need to tighten up. You can't just have blokes grabbed and scragged and not get a run at the ball.
This is time immemorial. This has been going on.
Yeah.
And it periodically comes in. I actually thought it was good theatre in a game that might not have been that entertaining to the neutral observer. Having Dacos Windhager cam and seeing this happen gave an entertainment point. And Dacos also did very well to fight back, and at the end of the game kicked that crucial goal.
Well, I actually, at the game, the entertainment was in seeing at the very first time Scott Pendlebury came on the ground. Now, I'm not sure if the TV footage picked this up, but he came on the ground because as Windhager was coming off, following Dacos off the ground. And another St Kilda guy had come on as well. And Pendlebury stood there and he waited to get to Windhager and to confront him, and pushed him and shoved him and was in his face and pointing the finger and really sort of having a go at him, which is very un-Pendlebury. And he hadn't even been on the ground yet, Pendlebury, but it was very much this statement of, we're going to make life just as hard for you today if you're going to make your life hard for Dacos. And you could see that throughout the game. A lot of players from Steele Side Bottom to Ed Allen, from the old to the young, were really pushing in, and McCreary, and really trying to put body on Windhager to let him know we will be doing the same to you.
Yeah. Well, Jack Chris made comments to that effect.
Yeah,
they were out to protect him.
After the game, did he?
After the game to Danny Russell. Danny Russell. So yeah, it's very much on their mind. But there's an argument among coaches at the clubs, at various clubs, that having the hard tag actually it allows the opposition to do things to you. So it doesn't necessarily work.
Dog eat dog, you mean?
Well, no, you can position the player somewhere at the centre bounce that can help you get a clearance because of the way you manipulate. He's following him, you're not following the ball.
Dacos moved to full forward a bit.
Yeah, things like that. The opposition can then move you around. But Ross Lyon's pretty smart on this stuff.
That's in a strategic sense, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to be glib, but my best tagging story from the weekend was listening to Isaac Heaney after the Port Adelaide game, when at the start of the game, I think it was Bergman who was tagging him. And Heaney said, yeah, look, he told me at the start of the game he was feeling a bit crook, so maybe. Well, can you believe a player would tell someone, look, I'm actually a bit off colour? Well,
he might be leaving.
Well, seriously, I mean, maybe at the end
would you
of the
believe
game.
it?
Well, Heaney said that he said it.
That's like
in the post-match interview.
That's like players with an injured right shoulder going out with the strapped up left shoulder, so the players go the wrong shoulder.
He played like he was feeling a bit sick too, but I
wouldn't would have felt sick at the end of the game.
Oh, imagine telling someone that. Anyway, I thought it was quite funny.
All right, we'll take a break there, come back and talk more about the Bulldogs and Jeremy McGovern's medical retirement.
We're online all the time. Just search Age Real Footy on Facebook or Twitter.
Bontempelli had that and then lost it. Trainer on hands and knees gave it back to the Bont. He's got an eye for it at the moment, the Bont. He's still the one.
Well, welcome back. The Bulldogs are back in the 8 and more importantly, they're back with Sam Darcy playing well and Bont in the team. But the other thing was that Jamarra was back at training last week, and he's spoken on the Rip Through It podcast with football's Oprah Winfrey, Mitch Robinson, and giving us a better understanding. I actually felt like I understood a bit more of the depth. It's
pretty raw, wasn't it?
Complicated.
Yeah, I had a chat to people at the AFL last week, and because Laura Kane has been doing a lot of work with him, and has been pretty regular sort of contact throughout all the dramas, and would reject out of hand that he was ever completely off the rails, which, there were some terrible stories going around, and obviously there were some major issues.
Oh, particularly ahead of the finals and during the finals last year.
Yeah. But look, in the end, and you wouldn't have picked 3 months ago, Jake, that Jamarra would be back at the club, and, even vague talk that he might even play a senior game. But, looks like he will play a VFL game. You want good players in the game, however badly they've behaved and however troubled.
He's also 22.
Exactly.
He's not 28. Now, it's different to some other people who've had multiple chances and have had a lot of issues. And as long as the thing I get down to, as long as he takes responsibility for his actions and he gets hold of his life with help, but takes responsibility with getting help. And that's all it gets down to. And people who make excuses constantly don't get anywhere. People who take responsibility and who get help, the right help.
So the podcast interview, you could call them excuses, but you could also call them, as the Bulldogs of, Amit Baines has repeatedly said, you cannot understand the depth of what this guy did. He burst onto the scene. He didn't get a game for a long time. There were obviously off-field issues. He had he was a party boy. He was always being photographed with Mia Favola. He was here, there and everywhere. And then, there was a reason, obviously, he wasn't getting a game. And then there was that period where he looked like he could be anything. And in the end, his road to recovery was going to be through footy. That's the road to recovery, isn't it? If he can make it stick and lead
partly. I mean, it's also a matter of how you manage the rest of your life, and footy can help you with that. But he's also got to help himself with that, and people and the welfare and other people will be helping. But I think there's some friends that he probably and people that he's been hanging out with that may not be the healthiest thing for him as far as his footy career, and therefore the way things have gone with him away from the foot, they may not be that helpful for him in a life sense. And he spoke about that being, in his terms, on the piss a lot and hanging out with them, but not really going anywhere. So I think there's a bit of agency for him in that, as far as not just football is the great redeemer, but he can be the great redeemer for himself in that. And
in a wider context, they've got Darcy back. Marcus Bontempelli is playing like a Brownlow medalist, after they missed him for all those weeks, 6 weeks or something, was it, or 7 weeks?
5, I think.
The midfield is, people say it's the best in the competition, and you can mount that argument with the way they're playing at the moment.
Last week it was Holmes and Smith.
Treloar got injured, and it doesn't really stop anything, does it?
No, you look at this Friday night. So they're playing Sydney at home. Sydney have also got their personnel back, and what a difference that made, particularly seeing Errol Goulden run around again. But, the thing is, they're still only just in the 8, and Gold Coast have got an extra game in their kit bag.
I think they've got...
So they need to
start.
That
the Bulldogs have got some points of difference that make them the massive threat. We've spoken about it on here before about them being a premiership threat. Their biggest issue for me in that is I think their bottom 4 or 5 players is weaker than the other top teams, but their top players are as good as anyone's. Like Sam Darcy is like Jeremy Cameron. He is this sort of incredible talent that is, as I say, a point of difference to others, and incredibly hard to stop. And they do have that midfield, and they've got, Bont. I was thinking that with like the Dacos discussion, Bont and Cripps and these guys, because they're the big midfielders, the bigger midfielders, they're not as routinely tagged in that style of way because they're just so much harder they're so much more powerful to stop in.
Well, look, I think that you can look at some premierships that are won where you get an overlap between 1 or 2 champions who are at near the tail end of their career, and you have emerging superstars coming up. And for instance, Collingwood had the end of the Pendlebury era and Sidebottom to a lesser degree coming in with Nick Dacos coming up, and they managed to get this little Venn diagram, this little intersection of those careers. And you can be lucky. Richmond, going way back, Caro had Royce Hart and Kevin Bartlett right through most of their glory era together, Francis Burke. So you get players together. But if you get the young one with the old one, now Bontempelli, there's a Bontempelli-Darcy intersection. And that period, the Bulldogs have to win a premiership. They have to get a flag. If you've got players that are generational like that, generational talents, and Bontempelli performance and Darcy ability, you have to get a flag out of it. And then you can throw in Ed Richards as a very good player. So you always have other very good players. They've got absolutely, they should be accepting nothing less than a flag in the next 3 years.
So they go up to Sydney on Friday night. I mean, Brisbane were 13th this time last year, but Brisbane had played in a grand final the year before. The Bulldogs, bowed out pretty quickly out of the finals, straight away out of the finals last year. So they need to beat Sydney. They absolutely need to win that game. And then it's, if they can start beating some teams in the top 8.
From 3 weeks ago, it's now a really good game. Where Sydney a few weeks ago, Sydney was now getting their players back. And, he's made some calls as well. Cox on people like Ollie Florent that have find themselves back out of the team. He's made some hard calls and they're playing much better footy now, Sydney. And the Bulldogs, what do you think the Bulldog of the Beveridge reappointment? By the time it came around, it was unsurprising, but from earlier in the year, did you expect it to play out that way?
Jury's still out for mine. I mean, he's clearly a brilliant coach, but he seems to me like an impact coach of 4 or 5 years. And it would have been brilliant to go over to somewhere like Carlton or Melbourne next year. And Melbourne certainly talked about him earlier this year and didn't do anything. And, no one did anything. No one, I don't think, contacted him from other clubs. Look, they've stuck with the man they know and love. He's made changes. They've made changes to the footy department, got a much stronger footy boss now. It seems to be the perfect storm for Luke Beveridge, who's sort of, I don't think he's reinvented himself, but he was on a charm offensive and...
he softened some edges.
Yeah.
He sought to.
He's mastered it well. That would be my view.
He sought to.
But look, he's, as I said, clearly a brilliant coach. I would have loved to have seen him go to another club and take them to a flag, which I think he's capable of doing in a very short time.
And so, Jake, speaking of impactful, Jake Stringer, the super sub.
Well,
unwrapping the package.
It's exactly what you get him for, isn't it? He's never going to be, Jake's never going to be, taking charge of leadership group meetings and, tutoring the young boys into.
I probably would have put him slightly ahead of sub, though, myself. But
it sort of suits his physiology. Power. He's an explosive power player, and he took the moment. He kicked 2 great goals.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have won the game without that. And who knows? I mean, because the thing about the Giants is their best and their worst, there's still a bit of a gap, even within games. But who would want to play them in a final, no matter where it's played?
No. It was from the Suns will come away disappointed because they, you lead that game. They could have got out to 6 goals nearly. In fact, the moment they could have got out to that was when Callum Brown's jumping around on the mark, being called. You could hear through the audio 3 times the umpire calling stand, and you can see him running around, and you think, how's that not a 50-metre penalty? Which would have been a goal, a kick taken at the goals on the goal line. But despite wearing some sort of pseudo West Coast jumper and playing away, they got the jump. And was there any? Do you come away disheartened? Do you come away? Was there a disgrace in losing that game to that team there?
They just can't win there. The goal
dropping out of the 8.
They can't win there. They should have. They were in the best position they've ever been in to win at NG Stadium, and they blew it. Really, and now. Well, albeit with a game in hand, they're out of the 8.
But just an observation looking at the ladder here. It looks like you'll need at least 13 to get in. So if there was a team, funnily enough, that could make a run at it, I fancy it would be Sydney. If there is going to be a team come from the clouds like Carlton did a couple of years ago, you'd say it's the Swans.
Well,
but it probably won't happen.
Gold Coast have got the home games. They've got Essendon twice in the back half, and they've got Richmond. So you've got to win 5.
Yep.
They've got to win 5 on that to get in.
They should make it. They should
could,
make
well,
it.
If they don't
make
it, they're going to be
it,
borderline again.
If they don't make it, it's a bit of a scandal, to be brutal.
So you sort of look at this. Fremantle are 9-5 and are 6th at the moment. They've played 14. They just don't look anywhere near as capable as the Bulldogs.
No.
Or the Giants even. It's and haven't had as good a year in my view as Gold Coast, although Gold Coast have got that game in hand. So Gold Coast have only played 13. So Gold Coast they should make the finals.
Yep. And if they don't, it's a disgrace.
Well, not a disgrace.
Oh, of course it is, Jake, with the players they've got.
It's just a
well,
failure.
it is a disgrace. No,
There's another word you can use. It's disappointing.
It's a savage disappointment.
Savage. What did you think of the
Fair enough.
amusing moment, at least amusing moment of the play on call from a player on the ground? And so
you
the background
reckon
was
it was
that,
Mac Andrews' teammate?
well, that's what was reported at the time, that Mac Andrews' teammate. So Mac Andrews is standing on the mark, for those who didn't see it. Mac Andrews is standing on the mark, and Jesse Hogan's lining up for goal. It's about 50 metres out, and he's readying to goal, readying to take his kick, and someone's called play on. You can hear it through the thing. Now, it was either Mac Andrews' teammate trying to panic Jesse Hogan into playing on, and I think they've agreed that it was a Gold Coast player that
If
called
that's
it
the
out.
case, that was a
But it was-
spectacular mistake.
But instead, Mac Andrews just heard it and ran to tackle Hogan, and therefore was done for running over the mark and 50-metre penalty. So, sort of made you wonder why it doesn't happen more often. Why
Yes. If it had been an opposition player and they could prove that, would they have not given the 50?
Yeah, I don't think the rules
They
have
shouldn't.
anticipated this. Have they? There's nothing in the rule says if an opposition player says play on and you then rush in, there will be no 50-metre
I suppose
penalty.
it's a bit
played.
like hearing someone in the crowd blowing a whistle, and they say, well, I didn't blow it, so keep going. Was amusing, if nothing else. Sadly, Jeremy McGovern has been forced into retirement through the concussion.
Yeah, we should acknowledge a great career.
Great career.
And a really great parting speech, I thought, Jake, where he sort of was philosophical. He's obviously tasted great success. He's tasted great disappointment. He hasn't gone out the way he would have wanted, but he is in his early 30s, 33, isn't he? So
32 or 3, yeah.
So I'm not discounting. You just pray that, he has a good and healthy life and this does not impact him as he gets older. But it's a sign of the times and it's going to keep happening. And unfortunately, people are going to have to change the way they play, Gleeson.
Yep.
Because
it's really... Look, first of all, we don't want the fact that it's a concussion retirement to overshadow what was a great career. I think back to the 2018 grand final when he had this internal injuries and, you'd speak to West Coast people that he managed to play. And if he hadn't played, there's no way they would have won that game. And you remember that last play in the game.
That last play was hilarious because
he was part of that major famous link of the chain.
Well, he took the mark. He took the intercept mark. And
but he also admitted he took the intercept mark because he was cooked and couldn't get back on the player he was supposed to be on, and then the ball fell to him because he was out of position, not being able to.
Anyway, he got up and played, and they won the premiership, and it was a great effort.
And he'll be able to celebrate that for the rest of his life. So,
but with the concussions, you're right. We're just gonna have to get used to it, and it is, it is someone called it a meteor coming at the game.
Yeah.
Someone on the commission, I think, said that.
That's one of the reasons I think Jeff Brown would make a great chairman. I mean, someone who understands the rules, the implications of footy, who wrote the rules, who will be all over the legal ramifications and has been, I think, quite critical of the AFL's handling in the past of concussion and the way they've handled that legally. For so many reasons, I think he'd be a great choice. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I'd like to see the field. I'd like to see the alternatives rather than just say
Craig
it
Drummond.
should be him. No, the ones
David
that we
Koch,
know of.
John Wiley, I think, has had some support, whether he's still in or not. But they're the names.
Peter Gordon.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's still in there, if he's got the support of all the clubs. You think Peter Gordon would make a good chairman?
I think he'd make a good chairman. He might be a bit, not divisive, but he may not be as popular right across the board. But I think he's smart.
I think Brown's got more
very
support,
well.
significantly more support.
Yeah,
anyway.
Sure. All right, we'll take a break there, come back with quick questions.
Get access to every episode as it drops. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
They're doing it again, the Lions. Into the middle to Ashcroft. One more over the top. And they are cutting the Cats to ribbons. And 50. And Morris will kick his fifth.
Well, welcome back, Caro. It was a whiteout cotton on whiteout at the Cattery last week, having lost on Patrick Dangerfield's 350th game and at home. Will other clubs attempt a whiteout?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of money from the sponsor, Cotton On, wasn't it? Apparently each T-shirt cost them about $5, so there were 40,000 T-shirts. That's $200,000. Yeah, I mean, good on them. They're trying something a bit different. It was a pity for them that they lost, but they just can't beat Brisbane, Jake, can they?
No,
they can't beat them anywhere.
Yeah,
at the moment.
Look. Let's look at the great performance from Brisbane. And some of the just a shout out to Hugh McCluggage. He wasn't best on the ground. It was Harris Andrews was the best player on the ground, and I hope he gets the Brownlow votes, given that defenders don't get them. It was an interesting suggestion. I think Jay Clark ran this of getting a defenders award, which I think is a good idea for the AFL. But I thought Brisbane's ball movement and their class on their finish was fantastic. Was it just a bad day for Geelong? Probably.
Well, at the moment, that's all it was. But those sorts of losses, you only know whether they were a mulligan later on when you see the greater body of work. For now, you do agree. You know, Chris Scott said, "Well, it was just we have to consign it as that." But
they clearly weren't. I mean, Lee Matthews said something on Saturday about they spent. You know, it was a bit of party mode. Yeah. You know, they were celebrating, you know, the game. It was a big game for them, celebrating 100th of a new player and relatively new player in Tyson Stengel and the 350th of Danger. And did they, to the slightest nth degree, take their eye off the ball? I mean,
only they know.
Yeah. And if it's you give them a mulligan, but they were well and truly smacked, weren't they?
Yeah.
And Brisbane are well and truly back in it after 2 losses, which the coach kept saying, but they weren't really losses.
Brisbane seem to need to be a challenge. They seem to need stimulation.
Yeah, true. Is the curfew affecting Noah Bolter and how he plays? Because he had a bit of a stinker on Sunday.
Well, I hope that's it. Because, you know, I mean, Kane Corn said on our show a few weeks ago that they shouldn't play him for the rest of the year because this stop-start thing is clearly affecting his footy. I think that's probably a bit harsh or a bit strong, but Sam Darcy just slaughtered him. And the way he played Bolter, it was without plan, it was without strategy, it was some bizarre sort of things. And it must be, it can't be good for your footy to have gone through what he's gone through and to be playing one week, not playing the next.
Off, yeah.
The bigger long-term worry for me is it a 7-year contract he's signed?
Yep.
I mean, he's not playing like a player worthy of that sort of deal.
Well, he may have had a whole lot of the year curtailed completely by the magistrate from that case.
Jake, will State of Origin make a comeback next year, and will that be a good thing? Pete Ryan's written about it. The WA government making a push for a WA Vic game next year.
Oh, look, it would be interesting to see. Yes, whether it's long term. I don't think you can do it every year. And
you called for this, Jake. You called for these, didn't you? Celebration games.
No, the AFLW.
I thought across the board.
I was thinking AFLW. I think the AFLW.
That's got real merit.
It's got real. They need it.
Australia v Ireland.
Australia v Ireland's a no-brainer, and I think they've got to do an all-star game. You know, Erin's team against Daisies or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it needs. No, I'm not sure. I'm not as convinced about State of Origin because there's so many good players in Queensland and in other Northern Territory now. It doesn't line up as easily with WA and SA v Vic as it used to.
Well, yeah, I think they'll call it this. The plan is WA v Victoria in the first instance, given that gather rounds soon afterwards, et cetera, and then in the end, do you care that it's just an exhibition game? I mean, I loved the Indigenous All-Stars game. I thought and it was clearly, wasn't a serious game. Soccer have friendlies; they're really popular.
Yeah.
Got a good
I think
crowd.
if you look at what's happened in NRL, which has taken over this idea that came out of the old VFL in back in your father's day, Carol. I mean, it was a huge thing, and that ignited in State of Origin to have it. The reason why it works in NRL is because it is full on. It's bigger than the club. It's bigger than the club.
That's the point. It's bigger than.
Whereas here in the AFL, it would be something that's smaller than the club footy.
Well, this is as a concept it's popular with fans, but not with clubs. So the fans all like the idea of having this State of Origin contest, but it's just it persuading clubs to risk their players and therefore risk a flag. It just never it's why it always sort of fizzles in the end, because players start pulling out and aren't available. So if it's just that exhibition game pre-season and
let's not pretend it's anything else.
No, that's right. That's why I'm saying it won't ever get that sort of gravitas to it that will allow it to be on a par with the NRL types.
But given practice games are so boring,
terrible,
that you may as well do something like this. I mean, it's sort of a glorified practice game that has a bit more interest, Jake. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Look, I don't mind saying it, but it's not going to be what the NRL have got.
No. And on that note, that is all we've got time for this week. Thanks to both of you, Jack and Caro, for joining us. And thanks to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. The Expert Tips podcast will be back on Thursday. Catch you then.